Chimaranga, this is Dedon Kamathi with this week's edition of Freedom Now. We'll commence with the African drumbeat historical calendar where we will big up the global victories of the oppressed. We'll follow with Arab Americans for Syria Johnny Achi, a regular contributing commentator who for the past 3 years has provided Freedom Now a remarkable accounting of the true political reality of the crisis in Syria. Clearly the U.S. war machine, thirst for profits, tried to bamboozle U.S. citizens into siding with the so-called rebels, but the massive U.S. citizens' resistance tied the Obama Democratic Party's administration's hands. This resistance was based on a mass educational campaign led by progressive Syrians like Johnny Achi. We'll follow with a discussion on the art exhibit Rise, Love, Revolution in the Black Panther Party.
We'd like to welcome back Johnny Achi from the organization Arab Americans for Syria. Mr. Achi has provided for the past 3 years a weekly update and insight in the U.S., Israeli, Saudi, Qatar, Turkey-backed Islamic fundamentalist drive, which seeks to displace the anti-imperialist, progressive, Ba'athist government of Bashar al-Assad. So, Johnny, can you give us an update of what's going on in the last 5 weeks in Syria?
Sure, Dedon. Thanks for having me again on the show. I think last time we spoke, we were in Geneva II talks, and that was the talks between the Syrian government and the opposition. Of course, the Geneva II fallen apart just like its earlier round Geneva I had. Both sides repeating their previous positions. The Syrian government wants to discuss the ceasefire and end to violence and how to fight terrorism, and consider this to be a priority. As the Geneva communique of June 30th of 2012, that was the first item of business. However, the opposition wanted to jump directly to point 8 of that communique, which discussed the interim or the transition government. The Syrian government cannot and will not discuss vacuum in government while jihadists from 82 different countries are roaming the land and butchering Syrian civilians. Also, the talks failed because the Syrian opposition become deeply fragmented and radicalized on the ground, and is not represented by those attending Geneva talks. So basically, whoever is negotiating on behalf of these various groups does not really represent them, and until the American and the Western government agrees to let all opposition, Syrian opposition, the ones that are being right now vetoed by the United States government because they're national opposition, they do not want them present. Unless they are present on the table, real talks will not really succeed. And future Geneva 3 and 4 and 5 does not have hope of succeeding without having the real, all oppositions be sitting on the same table. That's as far as the political end of it. Now, also in the last month, we've seen a tremendous advance of the Syrian army. The troops are involving in various fights, and we really could say now that we are in the last quarter as far as the battles on the ground. The Syrian forces have just entered the key rebel bastion of Yabruz on Friday. This is one of the last opposition-held areas near the border with Lebanon. So we're talking here about the Kalamon Mountains on the western part of Syria, which is the eastern part of Lebanon. These mountains have been under the control of the Lebanese, the various terrorist groups. And today the assault has caused a complete breakdown in the ranks of the terrorist groups who are losing ground. Because of that loss of a few days ago until today, we have the great news of the release of the Syrian nuns. The Ma'lula nuns, 16 nuns who were abducted back in November of 2013, as the Syrians surrounded Yabruz, and we know the nuns were in Yabruz. Negotiation took place, and there was an exchange between the nuns and some of some of the arrested members of some of these rebels. So the secured release of the nuns was taking place a few days ago, and that was great. Now, of course, we still have a lot of abductees. in Syria. And the two bishops, they have been almost for a year now abducted in northern Syria and Aleppo. And there's a lot of civilians who were abducted in Latakia. By Human Rights Watch, there's at least 200 women and children abducted from a small town in northern Latakia by Nusra Front, the same group who have abducted them. Today, a statement by the Ministry of Information in Syria said that they are working on releasing all abductees, and that all Syrians, whether they're Christians or they're Druze or they're Alawites, they're all equal in the eyes of the Syrian government. Yes, the nuns and the bishops will get a little bit more international attention, but all abductees in Syria will be released hopefully soon, and the Syrian government and the Information Minister Omran al-Zobi affirmed that the state is making all efforts to release all abductees. Talking about Nusra Front, if we have a few minutes, lately, as you know, Nusra Front was placed on the United States list of international terrorism about a year ago, about a year and a half ago. That's when the Free Syrian Army was considered to be the moderate, and the Nusra Front was considered to be the extremist. And the Nusra Front is al-Qaeda in Syria. Now, at that time, the United States put that Nusra Front on the international list of terrorism. And Abu Muhammad al-Golani, or Jolani, is the leader of Nusra Front, and he was placed as the 6th most wanted international terrorist in the world on the American list. Recently, with ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, have made tremendous advances. They are now considered to be the most ruthless of the Islamic militant group fighting in Syria. And what they've done in Raqqa, the area that in eastern Syria is under control, which has only about 4,000 or 5,000 Christians, they have required all Christian communities to pay gold as jizya, or tax, on non-Muslims, just like they used to do 1,400 years ago. They are restrained from any public expression of their religion. They're restrained from ringing the bells of the churches or renovate their churches. Of course, the delegation of Christians in Raqqa had met with ISIS quite a few months ago, and they were given three choices: convert to Islam, accept ISIS conditions to pay the jizya or tax, or reject and possibly be killed. And in a statement a few days ago on their website, they're saying that if the Christians reject, they are subject to being legitimate targets, and nothing will remain between them and ISIS other than the sword, which is by their own words. Now, in that case, the United States decided to say, okay, now ISIS is the real terrorists, and they represent al-Qaeda, and now Nusra Front is the moderate, because there's no more Free Syrian Army. The fight in northern Syria between ISIS and the Nusra Front is heavy. They've cost about maybe 4,000 deaths between them in the last just 2 or 3 months. So the United States said now Nusra Front is what we consider more moderate, and they released the name Abu Muhammad al-Golani off that list. They took his name off that list, trying to indicate now Nusra Front, is the more moderate, and that is the one that we're going to be backing up. So, we go back in circles, and as we know, they're all the same. All Islamics, whether they're Free Syrian Army, Nusra Front, ISIS, there's the Army of Islam, hundreds of different battalions and brigades, they all fit the same Islamic, ideology. An Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, and no room for minorities, no room for women in society. They want to turn secular Syria into an Islamic State, and we've talked about that for years on your show.
Now, can you address the upcoming elections?
Sure. We do have an election, a 2014 presidential election, and that's what no one is going to dictate how this is run. Of course, international matters are allowed and accepted, but the world still considers that that President Bashar Assad should not run. Of course, he will run in a democratic party. No one should be banned from running. The Syrian government has been saying all along, let's wait for the election and put your effort into peaceful means. Try to bring about maybe another leader on the opposition side, or a few leaders, or how many people want to run, to go ahead and do it. But the Syrian people will not be told who to be represented or who to lead this transition period in the future. Bashar Assad, we hope that he will run. He hasn't yet, publicly announced, but we don't see any other person capable at this point of taking Syria out of the hand of terrorism. And this is the main issue here. The Syrian army is making advances, and once all foreigners are kicked out, the Syrians will get back together, like in many areas where Syrians are surrendering their weapons and they're coming back into the Syrian army, or at least they'll send them home. And that's what's going to happen this summer. We hope that the international community stay behind Syria for the peaceful ending, and that election would be the first step taken.
Okay, Johnny, we'd like to thank you very much. I know it's early in the morning, and I appreciate you taking the time out to once again keep us updated. I know many of your analysis and your forecasts have actually proven to be true, starting back three years ago, when in fact it was portrayed as a civilian uprising in which that sector occurred. But in fact, what you said earlier, 82 different countries, jihadists from 82 different countries have taken over a peaceful uprising and made it into a jihadist war against the interests of the people of Syria. So we thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you very much, for having me.
Take care.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.